Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our CPE session. I see everyone is joining us. All of our participants are trickling in, so we're going to get started here in just a moment. And our session today, it's going to be a good one. It's a governmental session. Did you know? A guide to governmental accounting and auditing resources. So I think we're going to have a lot of useful information here for everyone today. My name is Robert Lemon. I'm one of the audit partners, and I'm going to just be the moderator today, but we will move forward. I'm going to introduce the real stars of the show for today. Our first presenter to introduce is Gwen Mansfield-Vogt. If you've ever done one of our previous CPE sessions with CRI and heard Gwen speak, you know you're in for a real treat today. Gwen is terrific with governmental expertise, especially as it relates to single audit. So we're really lucky to have her time today. She's going to do a great job presenting. And second presenter today, Dean Mead. Dean's been with CRI a little while, and he actually joined CRI from the GASB. He was very high up, was there a number of years, and really knows his stuff on GASB. Did a lot of good research and put together a lot of good tools as part of this presentation. So I think you're going to thoroughly enjoy hearing what he has to say. Just another terrific speaker we're very fortunate to have. Those are the stars. Then there's me as well. Like I said, Robert Lemon. I am a governmental audit partner and part of the governmental industry line team. So I appear on quite a few of these things. Many of you probably heard me speak here before. So I'm glad to be here, just moderating today to launch the polling questions, ask the polling questions, that kind of thing. I'll also be checking the Q&A boxes today. So if you do have any questions, pop them in the Q&A. You might see chats come from our team out to you, so that you might see things in the chat. But if you have a question as a participant, please pop those into the Q&A. That's how we'll be tracking those, and I'll keep an eye on those. So that's my role for today. So just a few housekeeping items. We want to make sure everyone gets their CPE credit. There are 2 credits available for today for the full if you attend the full course. And if you need to get your CPE, you need to be logged in using your own unique link. You should have all received a link to log in directly yourself. That's what's needed to track the credit and to obtain your own credit. Use your own unique link. Like I said earlier, there'll be some polling questions. You need to answer 80% of the polling questions to get your CPE today. You do not need to get the answers correct, but you do need to answer them. I think a lot of the questions today are not going to be too challenging, so please get your answers in. There's going to be 8 questions today, so that means 7 will be required to get your full CPE credit. So please do make sure you submit your answers, get your answers in. CPE certificates, they're going to be distributed via email. Takes us about 7 days to get everything out, so stay tuned to the emails for those. They will be delivered from the email address on the Prolera email address that you can see on the screen. And if you do have questions about CPE certificates, there's the email address there for our marketing team that they'll handle everything you need if you have any questions. So those are the couple of useful email addresses just to note down if you have any questions, need any help. So that's the housekeeping. So what are we going to cover today? So as I said, it's all about useful resources. So there's a theme. You'll see that word appearing a few times on the screen. We're going to start with GASB resources. Then we'll look at the Government Audit Quality Centre resources. We've also got the GFOA resources, and then the Government Accountability Office resources, and then some state oversight resources as well. So resources is the name of the game. We've got quite a lot of material. I'm going to dive in with a polling question, get one out of the way early, but we're going to keep moving fairly quickly because we've got a lot of good content today. So let's start with that first polling question. Let me launch that one here. And the first one asks, how many times have you attended a CRI webinar? So get your answers in. What I'm going to do for all the polling questions today, I'm going to leave them open for a little while, but leave them open and turn it back to the presenters whilst the question's still open. Won't be giving out the answers. I don't think anyone needs the answers. But yeah, just to keep things moving, I'm going to hand it over right now to Dean and let him dive in and keep that polling question open.
Thank you, Rob. Good morning, everybody. Rob is always incredibly complimentary about the speakers, and frankly, I get embarrassed every time he introduces me. I was even embarrassed when he was introducing Gwen, and everything he said about her is true. But it wouldn't be right for me not to throw that back at Rob and mention what a great moderator he always is. And not least of which, because of his accent, which gives this a whole kind of masterpiece theater kind of feel. It feels very substantive when Rob talks about it. Me, maybe not so much with my New York accent, but I don't think I have to say water very often during this presentation, so perhaps it won't show through. I'm going to start by talking about resources on the GASB website, which frankly could be a presentation unto itself. There is so much information and so much material available on the website, but I'm going to have to focus just on a few things that I think are the most useful and valuable to you as someone who is either a preparer of financial statements or an auditor or a user of the information in financial statements. First and foremost, if you go to GASB.org, all of the GASB's pronouncements, all of its statements, technical bulletins, implementation guides, everything that it has issued that constitute in their totality generally accepted accounting principles or GAAP can be found on the website. All of it's available for free. One easy way to get it is just to mouse over standards and guidance or to click on that. If you hover over it, there'll be a drop-down menu that you can see there that shows pronouncements and implementation guides and GARs online, which I'm going to get to in a moment. But any way that you navigate your way to it, you're going to get to these pages that provide all of the GASB's pronouncements as they were originally issued, absolutely positively free to download in PDF format. So this is what the standards and guidance page looks like on the GASB site, but you don't even need to go to that if you use that drop-down menu. And once you do get to the pronouncements page, you'll see that they're organized by the types of pronouncements. Statements are shown separately from concept statements and from interpretations and technical bulletins and implementation guides. And to make it a little easier, so you don't have to scroll through 101 statements to find the one that you want, they break them up into chunks of 25, which makes navigation a lot easier. But all of these will lead you to the PDF version of the original version of the pronouncement as it was issued. GARS is the Governmental Accounting Research System, and this is also provides all of GASB's issued material, but it's all in searchable form. You can not only do you get all the original pronouncements, but you also get access to GASB's codification of accounting standards, which organizes all of the currently effective guidance by topic. So there's there are sections for note disclosures, there are sections for leases, for pensions, for OPEB, and so on. All of it organized topically, and you can search and you can copy and paste stuff. It's incredibly useful. It's a fantastic research tool, and at least up until now, you could get the basic view, which doesn't have all of the really fancy annotation and bookmarking and searching tools, but you can still get everything else. You can copy and paste. You can do all the searching, all the content that's available in there. All you have to do is prove that you're not Arnold Schwarzenegger, or at least Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, the Terminator, and you get access to the basic view. But this is now out of date because yesterday, the Financial Accounting Foundation, GASB's oversight body, announced that GARS and the accounting standards codification of the FASB, the professional view that has all the bells and whistles in it, will now be available free to everybody. You no longer will have to pay a subscription fee to get the professional view. So I suspect that you'll still have to prove you're not a robot, but that will take you to the same professional view that in the past people have had to pay for. And sometime in the very near future, this is what I was hoping they were going to announce yesterday, but they haven't. There's going to be a complete revamp of the environment for GARS and the navigability of it. It's going to be incredible. When I was at the GASB, we had been working on this for years before I left to join CRI, and it looks like they're finally getting close to the finish line, and that's going to be incredibly valuable in terms of how easy it will be for you to find the guidance that you're looking for. This is what right now the inside of GARS looks like, and you can see on the left-hand side, you can look at the pronouncements as they were originally issued, the codification, the comprehensive implementation guide, which includes every single question and answer that the GASB has issued on any of its pronouncements that are still in effect and still applicable. Plus, there's a topical index, the finding list. Again, GARS, not just the website, but we could do an entire presentation on GARS too. And maybe we should someday, because not everyone realizes it's available and that it's free and that it's incredibly helpful. Just to give you an example of what things look like when you're actually looking at the guidance, this is what a page from the original pronouncements might look like in GARS. This is, I think, from statement 14. And if you see a bar on the right-hand side of a paragraph, that means the paragraph has been amended since it was originally issued. And if you see something in shading, that is a passage that has actually been superseded. And then if you're looking at this in the codification instead, where they're organized by topic, and therefore you're seeing all of the standards as they are currently effective, regardless of what statement or technical bulletin or implementation guide they came from, all together in one section. I think this is a section on either on note disclosures or on the ACFR, and you can see that they show you after each paragraph the source where this came from. And so this first paragraph came originally from statement 34, and since then it's been amended by statements 63 and 87, the statement on leases, which inserted that little phrase on the left-hand side, with lease assets presented separately.
Okay, here's time for polling question number 2. Let me go ahead and launch this, quickly read it out. This one asks, is there a cost to obtain accounting and financial reporting standards from the GASB website? So again, go ahead, get your answers in. I'm going to turn it back to the presenters to continue, and I'll leave this poll open for a little while.
Thanks, Rob. So the second thing that I want to talk about is GASB's technical inquiry service. I almost always, when I'm doing a presentation in person or even online, I will ask how many people know that you can ask GASB questions about their standards, and they will answer those questions, in most cases, relatively rapidly. It really depends upon how complicated your situation is, but they'll take from you the very specific facts and circumstances you're dealing with and explain how their standards apply to your situation. It's amazing how few people realize this, which is too bad, because that means everybody kind of looks at the GASB like all they do is make my life miserable, when in fact, they spend a tremendous amount of time kind of not making up for it, but saying, we're not just going to dump this on you. We're going to help you understand it and help you apply it. And one of the most significant ways they do this is by answering technical inquiries from stakeholders. So you can get to that a couple of ways. There is a quick link on the homepage for technical inquiries, but you can also find a link under projects in the menu at the top of the homepage. This is where those links lead, and they show you that there are 2 ways you can ask questions. You can do it by phone or email. This particular link goes to a list of the current projects that GASB is working on and the staff for that. So it's not showing you who answers the questions for, say, statement 87 on leases or statement 97 on section 457 plans. But if you do know who the relevant person is to ask a question to for the statement that you're interested in, they do have all the phone numbers and email addresses of the staff there. I think the better way to do it is to use GASB's online form, because that feeds directly into GASB's technical inquiry system, and it routes the question to the expert on the staff. And usually the expert on the staff is the person who led the project that led to the statement. So if you have a question about leases, it's going to the person on the staff who led the project that resulted in statement 87. And I can't imagine who would be better to ask questions about any statement than the person who wrote it. This is what the submission form looks like. The first page is basically contact information. The second page is really helpful because it walks you through the process of identifying what the relevant guidance is, which has two benefits. One is you may just answer the question yourself by identifying what the topics are and what the relevant pronouncements are. You may, in the process of doing that, answer the question and not need to submit it after all. But it also, by giving them as much information as possible, it enables the GASB staff to answer the questions more quickly. Like I said, the more complicated your situation is, the longer it may take for them to answer because they may need to ask you additional questions and they may need to spend some time figuring out how to apply the standards in that situation. But the more information you give them up front, the quicker you'll be able to get your answer. It's not unusual to be able to get an answer within a couple of days. GASB says they try to do it no later than 2 weeks after you've submitted the question, but that's relatively unusual. Those are really either two things. One, a very complicated question, or two, they've returned they've called you or emailed you and you're not responding to them. So it's your fault that it took 2 weeks. But generally, they respond very quickly, and people really are thrilled with this service. I didn't cherry pick this. I could have picked any quarter. This reporting on stakeholder satisfaction that from a random survey that GASB does every month. And this actually maybe is a little unusual that it wasn't 100% satisfaction across the top in terms of understandability, helpfulness of the staff, how quickly they responded, and overall satisfaction. So even if you don't like the statement that you're implementing, and you don't like the fact that you have to implement it, you still generally respond, man, they were really helpful. And I don't think there's anything more I could have asked, to get help from them on implementing that statement. And just a couple of other things, maybe 3 other things on the GASB website. Like I said, there's so much on there. You really should go and just explore because there's a lot of really useful resources on that webpage. One thing is a list of GASB speaking engagements. If you mouse over meetings in the menu, you can click on speaking engagements, and that will give you a calendar of where GASB staff and members of the board will be speaking over the coming year. So maybe they're speaking at a regional or local chapter of a national organization or one of the national conferences that's near you or that you're planning to attend. And GASB staff and the board members make well over 100 presentations a year across the country. And like asking a technical inquiry of GASB, hearing members of the GASB speak about what is coming forward and what's required of governments right now, those are the best people to hear from because they're the people who are most intimately knowledgeable about it. The second item is if you mouse over reference library, one of the things you'll see there is a link to educational webcasts and video and podcasts. I think there is a webcast that's archived there now from last fall. They usually keep webinars after they host them in the archive for about 6 months. But there are a ton of these short videos that are really interesting and informative. And if you just kind of want to get the thumbnail sketch of a particular pronouncement, for instance, the statement 101, you can see there. There are actually a 3-part series on statement 100 on accounting changes and error corrections. All of these are maybe 3 or 4 minutes long, and they hit all the high points. So if you just want to kind of get the 40,000-foot level, these are really helpful, and they point you to places that you can go to get more information. You can also find all of those videos and the recordings of the GASB's board meetings. If you're like me and a real GASB groupie and you like watching board meetings, you can get all of them there. You can get all the board meeting recordings on the GASB's website as well, and you can watch GASB meetings live. I just watched one yesterday. Their sort of in between meeting that they hold via webcast. I find them really interesting. Maybe you won't, but they're all very easy to find either on GASB's website or on its YouTube channel. And then lastly, if you want to stay up to date about what's going on with the GASB, mouse over About Us and click on Get News from GASB, and that'll lead you to a form that you can submit, and then you'll get emails from them, not very often, maybe once every other month at most, when new proposals are coming out or new final documents are coming out. That's usually the kind of news that they share, and that will help you keep up to date on major happenings at the GASB. But there's really no substitute, I think, for every once in a while going and visiting the website and seeing what's new.
Excellent stuff, Dean. I'm going to launch question number 3. This one asks, which of the following is your preference when it comes to paying for GASB standards? So once again, I shall leave that poll question open for a couple of minutes and turn it back to the presenters.
Thanks, Dean, Rob. Y'all are always so nice. I just like to toss the compliments back to both of you. I've been working with Rob here for 5 or 6 years, and even just hearing your voice makes me smile every time. Some of it's the accent, some of it's also you're just a generally nice guy. And Dean, we haven't been together for that long, but I truly value what you've brought to the firm with your GASB expertise. So we're going to switch gears here for a little bit and focus more on the audit side of the audit and accounting world. So we're going to start with the resources that are available through the Government Audit Quality Center, or the GAQC, or the GAC, as some people say, but that sounds to me like those Nickelodeon shows in the 90s, when they dump the GAC on your head. So I usually refer to it as the GAQC. This is a section of the AICPA, which of course is a professional organization for us, the CPAs in the United States. Actually, audit firms are the ones that get this voluntary membership, but it does have resources not only for us auditors, but also for auditees and the general public that may be concerned or curious about how the audit industry kind of works in the governmental sector, especially as it relates to federal funding and audits of such. And, in recent years, especially with all of the COVID-19 funding that went out and was distributed to healthcare organizations and businesses, the reach of that has kind of expanded beyond the governmental entities and not-for-profit entity world, because, there's a lot more for-profit entities that are receiving federal grant funding, especially as relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. So those resources can be available up there for those folks as well. And here's just what the landing page for the GAQC homepage looks like. You'll see there's some quick links up here, if you're needing to find somebody who can help you with some governmental auditing services or questions. Some of the basics, but what is a government audit? What does that consist of? And then there's resources available here. You'll see there's stuff about COVID-19, about the OMB compliance supplements, which we'll discuss more in a little bit. And a bunch of other sources of information. There is the AICPA TV link there, which it's more limited than what the GASB has, but a lot of their presenters are very, very good and very experienced. So there can be some good information there as well. Okay, so here's a listing of some of the free resources that are available. The GAQC alerts. These come out, it really varies. I'd say an average of about once a month or 6 weeks. But when there's a lot of developments in the field, they'll come out a lot more frequently as information or guidance is released. Now, with all of the COVID-19 funding that's been bouncing around, These have been coming out a lot more frequently, just as circumstances dictate. There are COVID-19 resources up there, both as a source for entities who are spending that funding, for auditors that are working with that funding from the audit side, and information there about what the audit is going to focus on that auditees can really use to their advantage. There's also resources for the OMB compliance supplements. We'll talk about that a little bit more coming up, but really the focus here is that when the compliance supplement is originally released by the Office of Management and Budget through the White House, it comes out as about a 2,200 page PDF. One of GAQC's most useful services is they split it up and allow you to download it section by section so you can get to exactly what you need at any specific time. They also do have archived web events up there. Some of their web events, especially those that focus on specific auditing questions, are members only, but they do have archives up there of ones that may be more geared towards a broader audience. For example, I know there's one coming up in the next couple of months that relates to the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant funding, which was distributed not only to nonprofit, but also to for-profit entities such as movie theaters and playhouses that were required to shutter their operations due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, cool. So here is what you can find in the AICPA's Auditee Resource Center, which is also available from that GAQC homepage. Okay, again, there's information on COVID-19 and the effects on governmental auditing and the single audit. There's links to both FASB and GASB accounting resources. So of course, the GASB resources that Dean has mentioned will be available through link there. And also the FASB requirements that apply for the nonprofits and the other non-governmental entities. There's also ways to get to those through the AICPA. Operational performance, governance and management, both of these are really focused more on the entity side rather than us auditors. So there might be resources, checklists, webcasts, podcasts that deal with improving operational performance and some of the issues that can come up in the governance and management area, especially as it relates to preparing for and succeeding in your audit. There's lots of single audit resources, resources for state and local financial statement audits as well, and to the Yellow Book, which is what we refer, which is the colloquialism for the government auditing standards that are important in single audits and in many state and local financial statement audits. So these GAQC alerts, members of the GAQC will get these emailed out to them on a periodic basis, but they are also all archived up on the website. And these will be a quick summary of news items that affect the government auditing field. They will come out when guidance is released by the OMB, federal awarding agencies, and other entities. As an example, during 2020, there were several memos that were released by OMB as it related to flexibilities and waivers related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Those were all released in these alerts with a quick little explanation and also links and resources associated with those. They will also have information about upcoming GAQC events. Again, some of these will be very, very useful to auditees that have been receiving funding from certain governmental entities, or in some cases that just want to know more about the government auditing process. There's also been recently, of course, a few severe weather related extensions that came up through, especially for the Federal Audit Clearinghouse submissions. And I learned of those through these alerts. So here's just a screenshot of the most recent ones that were up there. There's actually been a couple more, at least one more since this, but it was, well, I was on my honeymoon in Cancun, so, I didn't really pick that one up here. But you'll see the different variety of topics here. And, but, there's some of them were really close together just because there was so much stuff happening at that certain time. So again, it's I'd like to even check that a couple times, probably about once a month, just to see if I missed anything. Thanks, you can go ahead. And here's an example of one of these GAQC alerts. You can see there's just a quick little blurb about the stuff that they want to communicate and links to additional resources there as well.
Okay, and time for another polling question. Let's go ahead and launch number 4. Number 4 asks, have you accessed the Government Audit Quality Center resources before? Okay, again, I'll leave things open, turn it back to the presenters, and shut it down in a couple of minutes.
Great, thanks, Rob. Okay, so I mentioned before that these compliance supplement postings are probably the thing that I use the GAQC the most for. Again, it's posted by section, so you are not searching through a 2,000+ page PDF for what you're looking for. There's also a brief commentary provided on each section, especially for those that are new to navigating the compliance supplement. That's very, very useful. Okay, and we'll just kind of discuss what this looks like every year. So it comes in 8 parts. The bolded ones here are those that are most universally applicable and useful outside of the audit sphere itself. Okay, the background, purpose, and applicability. This is maybe 5 or 6 pages of information. It just kind of describes what the compliance supplement is, what the single audit is, and gives a little bit of history related to that. The internal control section, part 6. This is a relatively new part of the compliance supplement. It was came out in about 2019, I believe. And I would encourage anybody who has responsibilities related to designing and implementing internal controls related to federal programs to study this section. It has a few pages of overall information about, what internal controls are, why they're important, especially as it relates to federal awards, and the non-federal entities' responsibilities as it relates to them. But probably the most important and useful part of this section is that it has examples of internal controls that can be placed into action at your own organization for each of the compliance requirements that your auditors will be concerned with. Okay. And then finally, the appendices. So there's several of these. The ones that you may find most useful, there is a listing of names and contact information for contact persons within each federal awarding agency and department. There is information about, especially now, there's information about the COVID-19 effects on the single audit, as well as other items such as the research and development cluster and how that works in relation to the different programs. There's also information about which programs may or may not be included in a block grant program, which can change how those programs work at your entity. Okay, those are definitely the most important ones there. So compliance supplement part 1. Yeah, as I said before, this is kind of your brief overview. It also discusses recent changes to the guidance, and when major changes are anticipated in the near future, it will also discuss those. And also gives you a map as to how to use the rest of the compliance supplement. From an auditee perspective, there are definitely parts that will not be directly applicable to you. But this will point out which areas you may find useful. We'll skip down to part 6. Said before, there's 5 pages there of general information about internal controls. And then these examples of internal controls, they're broken out into 2 main sections. There's the illustrative entity-wide controls. Those are the ones that kind of work on the organization as a whole. Those could be what the board, those charged with governance, the activities that they need to do to ensure a strong control environment. And then there's also illustrative specific controls for the control activities. Those are your day-to-day controls. Anything from who needs to review a purchase order before a cost is charged to a grant, to how subrecipients need to be monitored, to the process that federal reporting goes through before it's submitted. It's also important to note that this does include considerations for large and small entities. In my experience, the smaller entities definitely struggle a lot more with internal controls just due to limited resources. So this can definitely give you some ideas of what you may be able to adapt to your organization's circumstances. Okay, and here's just a little shot of what those illustrative entity-wide controls examples look like. See here, it gives you a little bit of an idea of what this component of internal controls is concerned with, and gives you some illustrative controls of how to actually implement the controls over this area. And honestly, when your auditors are coming in to come and look at it, they will be looking specifically for items such as this. If you think about your single audit as an exam or a test, this is your study guide and your cheat sheet all rolled into one. Okay. And then this is an example of those, the specific controls for your control activities, your day-to-day items for each of these specific compliance requirements. You'll see this can just be used again to evaluate and design your internal controls as it relates to these areas. And here's some more. As you can see, there's lots and lots of information here, and you should be able to find items that can be adapted to your organization's specific circumstances. More. There we go. So part 8, here's some of the appendices. Again, they're Appendix 3. That's where you can find the contact information for the key management liaisons and program contacts. As an auditor, I have used this when we have questions that need to go out to the federal agency. I've also encouraged clients to reach out to these folks if they are having problems getting information from their specific contacts. Appendix 17, this is where these other audit advisories live. And those, they'll be updated every so often. The last updates were definitely related to the COVID-19 pandemic.
All right, polling question number 5. I'll launch this one. Question 5 asks, which part of the compliance supplement do you see as the most useful to your role? So get your answers in. I'll leave the question open for a couple of minutes and turn it back to the presenters.
I think that means it's back to me now, right? So the Government Finance Officers Association website also has a tremendous amount of useful information on it. And the great thing is that you don't necessarily have to be a member. Interest of full disclosure, I am a GFOA member. I'm a member of the Florida GFOA chapter and my local Palm Beach chapter down here in South Florida. But please don't think I'm shilling for the GFOA. They by no means need my help publicizing what a terrific website they've got. But I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the great things that are on there that you might find useful, not just as a preparer of financial statements, but also as a user of financial statements. And the GFOA is particularly good at providing information that is consumable by city council members and state legislators and county supervisors and other people in legislative bodies, other elected officials, which is helpful both to them and to the finance officers and the auditors who have to explain these concepts to city councils and county boards and so on when they're discussing accounting and financial reporting issues or presenting financial statements for them to review, or an auditor coming in and presenting the results of their audit of their financial statements. So there's an awful lot on there that's valuable, but if you look just in particular at the best practices and resources section, those two main groups of items, the best practices and then resources on the right-hand side there that cover a variety of things, with the hiring issues and staffing issues that a lot of governments are facing right now. It's no surprise really that the first couple of resources on there have to do with finding public finance workforce and staffing who can fill in the finance officer type functions that are provided in government. And there's an entire section on accounting and financial reporting resources as well. And I'll show you both of those sections so you can get a sense of what kind of information is there. So GFOA organizes its best practices into 9 categories on the website. The best practices are developed by its standing committees, and then the standing committees vote on whether to issue those. There's an awful lot of really valuable topics here that they provide best practices on, not just in the accounting area, but budgeting, pension and OPEB administration, debt management, treasury and investment management, and so on. But looking specifically, since we're talking about accounting and auditing resources, these are what you will find if you look at best practices under accounting. There are some high-level policies there with respect to generally accepted accounting principles, but then some more specific accounting issues related to capital assets, cost accounting, disaster recovery, grants administration. Under financial reporting, there are policies related to financial statement preparation, such as their policies with respect to what they consider to be timely financial reporting, and even some things that aren't strictly GAAP reporting, like reporting at the departmental level, and non-GAAP reporting, such as popular reporting, which is something the GFOA has, well, for lack of a better term, popularized and championed, and things specifically related to the ACFR, and then some additional things down here under specific applications, looking at more narrow issues, securities lending, tax abatements, which is something I think a best practice that they developed when GASB issued Statement 77 on tax abatement disclosures. And then under the accounting and financial reporting resources section, if you click on that link, you get this page, and you can see that there are 130 items here, and 92 of them are free, and anybody can access them. You don't have to pay for them. You don't have to be a member. There are some things that are require a payment or require you to be a member of the GFOA, but the overwhelming majority of the items that are here are available for free. And it's really easy to navigate this page and to search and to find things that are relevant to what you're interested in. And it's a wealth of information coming from an organization that has unparalleled insight into the role of the finance officer and the various aspects of financial management in government, and items that are useful directly and specifically to auditing, but also things that auditors will find useful in understanding their finance officer clients and how to communicate about what they're doing for their clients, both to their finance officers and to their elected officials.
Time for another polling question. So let's launch number 6. This one asks, which of the following statements is closest to the reason you attended today's webinar? So with that, I'll leave it open and turn it back to the presenters.
Right, so we are going to hop over to the resources that the Governmental Accountability Office, or GAO, has for us. And this is the source of the Yellow Book. So GAO is kind of the oversight agency for the government, the United States government as a whole. Okay, it's been around for just over 100 years now. And really, this is, they provide the government as a whole with assurance that the funding provided is being spent and audited in accordance with their wishes. Okay. So here are the main standard setting guides that are out there from GAO, and this relates to GAO's role as an audit organization. And the Yellow Book, now that's the one that most of us are probably the most familiar with. That is government auditing standards. For audits that are performed under government auditing standards, these are the rules that the auditors must follow. There's also the Green Book, which relates to internal controls in the federal government. This may also be useful. Again, this can help in designing internal controls at any organization, especially those that spend federal monies. There's a financial audit manual, which we won't really go into today, that more relates to the audits performed at the federal government level. And then the Federal Information System Controls Audit Manual, again, that is more at the federal level than anything that we're dealing with on this presentation. Okay. So the Yellow Book. So this really relates to governmental audits, requirements related to competence of the auditors, integrity maintained in the process, the objectivity of the auditors, and auditor independence. Every single audit is under the Yellow Book, and this will also apply to many other types of governmental audits. For example, the vast majority of governmental audits in the state of New Mexico will be under the Yellow Book, even if they do not have any federal funding at all. That is due to state laws. Many grant agreements, even if not federal funding or not to the level where you would be required to get a single audit, will require that government auditing standards be used in the audit process. And you'll also see this referred to not only as government auditing standards or GAS, but also as generally accepted government auditing standards, or GAGAS. That does get pretty confusing to where we've got all of these different terms floating about. Updates to the Yellow Book. This is updated pretty rarely, but it does happen. The most recent version is the 2018 Yellow Book. Okay, that imposed some new regulations or requirements related to independence, that you may have seen changes to some of your auditors' communications related to that. But since that time, there were also updates related to COVID-19 issued that did not create an entirely new Yellow Book, but did change the way it is adopted and applied. There'll be a focus on certain areas in the audit that were highlighted due to changes in the way everybody worked due to COVID-19. But there was also flexibility provided and extensions provided for auditors meeting CPE requirements. One of the major areas of the Yellow Book does relate to CPE for auditors performing government audits under GAS. So, and then there was concern in the industry that COVID-19 causing cancellation of in-person conferences and such would create difficulty, so there were extensions granted. All formal revisions for the 2018 Yellow Book do go through a public comment process. This is pretty extensive, and there's adequate time for concerned parties to make comments before anything official comes out. Okay, so here's a quick overview of the main focuses of the Yellow Book. So competence, again, this is where those CPE requirements come in. As an example, 2 days, 2 hours of CPE will count for 2 hours of government auditing standard CPE. And this is where we're focused on the skills, knowledge, and experience, or SKI, of the auditor. Okay, there's been actually, as there's more and more governmental funding going out, again, related to the COVID-19 pandemic in particular, there are concerns in the industry that there may be auditors doing government auditing standards audits out there that do not have the relevant SKI to perform those audits. It's very important that the auditors performing the audits do have that SKI. One, so that they're aware of what they need to be looking for and the special procedures that need to be performed. And two, so that the audits that they do perform are adequate to meet requirements. Okay, the second area of focus in the Yellow Book is integrity. Again, this falls on the auditors, where as auditors of governmental entities or entities that are spending funds provided by governmental entities, the auditors do have a responsibility to the public interest. Those funds that are being spent are our tax dollars. So therefore, the auditors do have a responsibility pretty much to society and the public as a whole. That means that auditors must be objective, nonpartisan, and non-ideological. This can be difficult in some cases. That's why larger firms will typically have a way for an auditor to back away from a certain project if they find that they are not able to be objective in those circumstances. And that could either be objective and, letting stuff slide that may not be entirely okay, or in being entirely too strict and maybe, causing issues that may not actually be issues. There's also objectivity, which is related to integrity. This is where the auditors must be independent, not only in appearance, but also of mind. So again, this is a very difficult area to be 100% sure on, because nobody can know another person's mind. But it is important for us auditors to maintain that independence. Impartiality and intellectual honesty are also highlighted here, and the avoidance of conflicts of interest. And this is really focused on making sure that the auditors involved in these engagements are serving the public's interests and not their own. This also relates to issues that could arise at the firm level. For example, this for fees that have not yet been paid. This is where independence may be impaired due to issues such as that, where there's really an economic driver there that may cause a lack of objectivity. And finally, independence. This is where our non-attest services come in. Now, in a lot of cases, especially for smaller entities, the auditors will assist in services such as preparing the financial statements, the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, and the data collection form, as well as perhaps doing some journal entries for conversion to, say, GASB 34 and the other newer GASB statements that do involve, number changes that may not be reflected in an entity's cash basis records. The real focus here is that the auditors are not making management decisions or taking upon management responsibilities. And this is where it's important to evaluate management's skills, knowledge, and experience. Attending webinars such as this one are a great source for management to develop those skills, knowledge, and experience. If nothing else, between this webinar and the follow-up information that you'll be provided, you will have links to where you can find this knowledge. Now, even if all you remember from today is our three little faces here looking so pretty, at least you will have the resources provided for if a question does come up. That's an important step in making sure that you have the skills, knowledge, and experience to allow your auditors to remain independent. Okay. Oh, the Green Book. So this one really only formally applies to federal agencies themselves. Okay, just like every state and local government, federal agencies do have policies and procedures to ensure effective resource use and to fulfill their mission, goals, objectives, and strategies. So this is a framework for that. And it's for use by management and governance really more than on the audit side. Auditors do use these principles to evaluate a system of internal control, but these are applied directly by those at the audited entity. And again, it does provide a framework similar to the COSO framework that is really the overall internal control concept used in the United States. Here, updates to the Green Book, just like the Yellow Book, any updates do go through a public comment process. And for the Green Book, the 2014 revision is the most current. There are other GAO resources that are free of charge. FraudNet. I kind of like this name. I think it's because it kind of brings me back to the days of the early internet when everything was a .net. And I don't know, I think it just brings out my old inner teenage geek in me. So, but this is a kind of a whistleblowing line for the entire federal government, as well as entities that are spending federal funding. You can use this system to report suspected fraud, waste, abuse, or mismanagement of federal funding. There's anti-fraud resources posted as well, including a conceptual fraud model, a framework for managing fraud risk, various reports of investigations that they have performed, and examples of fraud schemes that they have seen. These are often some of the more interesting resources out there. I think it's pretty much a part of the human condition that we like kind of seeing what the bad guys get up to. Your CSI shows and your movie thrillers and all that. I guess this is the accounting geek version of those. So I do like looking at those. Here's their infographic for FraudNet. You can see there's an email address. There's a phone number. And this really truly is a whistleblower line. If you have concerns, this is where you put them, and then they will be investigated by the appropriate persons. Okay. Here's some more resources that are free of charge. I mentioned these first two before. they're not really going to apply at the state and local government or nonprofit level. But they are up there and available for review if you're curious or if you need some reading material. Then reports, testimonies, and recommendations released by GAO. Again, some of these are the result of fraud investigations or other audits done at the federal level. Sometimes these are the ones that end up in flashy news headlines in the New York Times or whatever, where the Department of Defense can't account for however many trillions of dollars. And, that can be the source of those flashy news articles. Okay. Polling question, turn over to Rob.
Excellent. Thank you, Gwen. And just before I launch this one, Gwen mentioned during her section there will be a follow-up resource that everyone on this webinar will receive via email. It usually takes us a couple of weeks to get that out, but what we've designed and plan to send out is like a one-page document with links and useful information. It's a kind of a one-stop shop for accessing all these resources. And just like Gwen was saying, as long as you know where to look and you have that resource and you use that one, you'll know where to look and you can get to the right answer often with the resources there. Also, before I launch this one, we've had a few questions come to me through the Q&A. So what I'll do, I'll launch this question, leave a little bit of time this time, rather than sending it straight back to the presenters, leave a little bit of time to answer it. And then Dean, I'm going to pick on you for some of these questions that have come in and see if you want to give the answers. But let's give everyone a minute here with the polling question. Question number 7 asks, which of these would you not find on the GAO website? Is it the Yellow Book, the Blue Book, the Green Book, or FraudNet? Gwen's favorite website, FraudNet. And just before, Dean, I hit you with these questions that have come in, just to give everyone a moment here on the polling question, I'll remind everyone, you do not need to get this question correct. You just need to get an answer submitted in order to get your CPE credit. You have to answer 7 out of the 8 questions we'll be doing today. This is number 7, so there's one more to come at the end. So please do try and get your answers in. I wanted to give everyone a moment here to concentrate on getting the answer in, and then they can hear the question and answer properly, Dean. So let's just give everyone a couple of seconds here to get a few more answers in. And then I'm going to hit you with, we got 3 questions here, Dean. A couple of them are kind of similar, but I think it's stuff you and Gwen kind of touched on briefly. So I'll go ahead and hit you with these questions, but please, if you've not answered the polling question, please do that as well quickly. So Dean, what I've been asked, is there a cost to obtain any of the GASB's resources? I think you addressed this earlier, but just in case people missed it.
Yeah, for the most part, no. Most of the stuff that's on the GASB website, most of the things that GASB produces as its product, the building blocks of generally accepted accounting principles are free. You can either get them free in as a PDF in their original format, or you can use GARS, the Governmental Accounting Research System, to look through the existing guidance as it is in effect in the codification or in its original form, but in a searchable form. And as I mentioned earlier, the full-blown professional view that has all the bells and whistles is going to become free to everyone, and the Financial Accounting Foundation and the GASB have decided to get rid of the fee. So that was really only one of the 2 things I can think of that cost anything. The other is if you want hard copies, printed copies of GASB's pronouncements or of the codification. I'm not going to reach behind me, but sitting right over here on my desk is what GASB calls the annual bound volumes. The codification, which together is, you put the 2 volumes, it's about that thick. The original pronouncements, which are pretty much close to the same thickness, and the comprehensive implementation guide, all of those are available to be purchased in printed form, as well as individual pronouncements, and those do cost some money. You can get them through the GASB's store, on the website. There is a link in the menu over to the right-hand side. I think it says store, and that's where you can purchase hard copy materials. But otherwise, if you're satisfied with having it in electronic form, or you want even print it out on your own, you don't have to pay for any of the stuff that the GASB issues. And that's I think, a product of the fact that the GASB, after the Dodd-Frank Act, did get a funding mechanism that works through the municipal bond secondary trading market, and trading volume produces some contributions from bond traders that produces about 80%, I think, of GASB's annual revenue. The rest came from publication sales, but that used to be very different. And the GASB used to be much more heavily dependent upon selling its documents for a price. And now, at this point, you can get most of them, as I said, absolutely free.
Perfect. Good detail there, Dean. Couple more questions. And I think this question came in before Gwen maybe touched on the answer, but let's recap just in case. And either one of you feel free to answer this one. It's kind of similar. It just simply asks, what other free resources are available on the GASB website? So actually, no, Gwen, you talked about other free resources, not specific to GASB. So maybe Dean, will stick with you. You may have just kind of covered all of this one about the free resource on GASB, but if there's any particular ones you want to highlight.
Well, you're going to really test my memory now as to what's on the website, because even if you just scroll across those menu items on the top, there's probably something like 40 or 50 items that you can link to. That's not an exaggeration, but among the other things that off the top of my head I can think of, if you're interested in what's going on at the GASB right now, what it's doing with its current standard setting projects, the research that it's conducting, the post-implementation reviews that it's performing of major and comprehensive pronouncements like pensions and OPEB and leases and fiduciary activities and fair value measurement and application. You can get a lot of information about where those stand, who the staff are who are working on them, for the current projects, what decisions the board has made to date, excerpts from the minutes of the meetings, and kind of status on where in the process of developing the standards that project is. The GASB's technical plan in its entirety, which is updated 3 times a year, is available to be downloaded from the website. There are a variety of articles that GASB has published over the years. There's probably a couple of hundred of them on there on various topics, various pronouncements over the years, particularly plain language articles that GASB originally started to develop for financial statement users and other non-accountants, and they turned out to be really valuable to finance officers and auditors as well, both to help them understand some of the more complex things GASB was doing, at least to understand the context of those standards, but also to help them to then in turn explain it to their elected officials or their supervisors or their city council members who tend not to be accountants, and so it's helpful to auditors and finance officers to learn how to explain some of these more difficult concepts in a language that most people can understand. And let me think, what else is on there? All of the GASB, there's a section specifically for academics, but it's valuable to more people than just academics. And in that section, you can find all of the research reports that the GASB has ever published. Those were called Green Books too, Gwen. But whereas the GAO's Green Book is, I think, 8.5 by 11, the GASB's Green Books were more like 6 by 8 or 5 by 7 or something like that. And at least in the first half of GASB's existence, when it was working toward developing Statement 34, it contracted with academics and other researchers for a lot of foundational research that went into supporting what ultimately became the requirements statement 34 and subsequent standards, and the memos that GASB now, educational memos that GASB staff provides to the board when they conclude a big research project. Those are all available in that section of the website as well. And I could probably go on all day, but those are the ones that really jump out to me off the top of my head.
Those are good ones. Thank you, Dean. Excellent. I am going to ask you a third question, and I think this third one may have been the one Gwen subsequently touched on, but let's just address it anyway. What other organizations, offices, or agencies are likely to provide free resources for government accountants and auditors? So just make sure that everyone heard the right answer. The details here. It's a question again. Other organizations, offices, or agencies that might provide free resources for government accountants and auditors.
I will, in the last section of this webinar today, talk about some state level entities that provide resources, but apart from those, a lot of the national professional organizations in the government sphere provide valuable resources on their websites as well. I chose to talk about GFOA today because I find that to be among all of them the one that has the most useful information and the most that's free to anybody to use. But organizations like the Association of Government Accountants, the Association of School Business Officials International, which is people in public schools doing business functions and finance functions, the National Association of College and University Business Officers, the National Association of State Auditors, Controllers, and Treasurers, the International City Council Management Association, the National Association of Counties. All of them, have at least some useful information that I think would benefit both financial statement preparers and auditors of financial statements, and even the organizations that aren't strictly finance oriented, the way, for instance, the AGA or NASAC are more broadly oriented organizations like ICMA or NACO or the Council of State Governments or the U.S. Conference of Mayors. You'll still find some finance or budget oriented sections of those organizations where there may be valuable resources that are available on their website for free. Excellent.
Well, I appreciate everyone hanging with me for those few questions. They were great questions. Please keep them coming in. I will go ahead and actually share the results of polling question number 7. It was open for 5 minutes or so, and I just shut it down a few moments ago. Gwen, you can just make sure. Did everyone get? How did people do on this question here, Gwen?
It's definitely the blue book. You use that when you want to sell your car. I sure hope the GAO isn't involved in that process.
Oh, I thought you were referring to the GFOA's blue book.
No. This is for the GOA. Yeah.
But for those who don't know, relevant to what we're talking about today, the GFOA's blue book, which is titled Governmental Accounting, Auditing, and Financial Reporting, or the GAFR, is a compendium of information about finance, accounting and auditing and financial reporting issues. I didn't talk about it before because that is one of those things that you have to pay for. But I have a copy, and I had a copy even before I was a member of GFOA, because they do a tremendous job of helping to interpret for accountants and auditors how to deal with GASB pronouncements and with even with auditing standards in practice, and based upon their experience and the experience of their members. So you were talking about the Kelly Blue Book.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about the GFOA Blue Book.
No,
Yeah.
but you're right. That is definitely more relevant here.
It's one of the color books.
Yep.
No, that was excellent. Thank you for clarifying that one. I thought it was worth sharing the results for that particular question. I appreciate everyone hanging with me during that little intermission. I'm going to turn it back to the presenters, but like I said, please keep those good questions coming in. We'll address some more at the end.
So as promised, I wanted to highlight that at the state government level, there are a number of common entities, agencies that pretty much every state has that have oversight responsibilities for some or all local governmental entities. And I wanted to show you some examples from some of the states that CRI has much of its work in, and which you will find if you happen to be in one of those states, really tremendous and tremendously valuable information and that is even more specific to your circumstance because it is in the context of the state that you're located in. And as I said, every state has this. So I'm only going to show examples from a handful of states, but all 50 states and the US's territories and provinces, they all have these types of functions at the top government level. So starting with state auditors' offices, the state auditors' offices, their responsibilities may vary a little bit from state to state, but among the things they have in common is they tend to be the place where the statewide accounting policies are established, where you're going to find charts of accounts and other rules for how governments should be tracking their finances and reporting their financial information on a periodic basis to the state government. They also tend to do a lot of audits, not just performance audits, which you will tend to find all of them doing, but many of the state auditors' offices also perform financial audits for local governments. In some states, there's a handful of states where the state auditor's office, I think, does almost all of them. And then there are a bunch of states in which I think some governments have an option as to whether to go with the state auditor's office or to go with a public accounting firm to do the audit of their financial statements. And so it's not surprising that there's a lot of really useful information on those auditors' websites. So here's one example, the Alabama Department of Examiners of Public Accounts. And if you go and click on resources, among what you're going to find under there are these audit manuals and guides that in some cases are specific to particular types of entities. So there's an overall guideline for municipal audits document, but there's also a more specific document related to hospitals. And this, I believe, both public and not-for-profit and private healthcare entities, mental health centers, community corrections, volunteer fire departments. Depending upon what state you're in, that may vary as to what types of entities they're addressing. For instance, Colorado has a ton of fire districts. You don't tend to find those in most states, but they have a lot of fire districts. And I suspect that if you were to look at the state level resources in the state of Colorado, that you'd find some that were specific to those types of entities. If you happen to be in a state that has a lot of mosquito abatement districts, those also are common to a handful of states, but not to most states. In those states, you're likely to find some that are guidance that is helpful specifically to those types of entities, if you happen to be from one of those entities or you happen to have them as your clients. This also on the same website from the Alabama Department of Examiners of Public Accounts, there's a great section down here. And I hope you can see my mouse in this case because I'm trying to circle what's down there. But among them, the do's and don'ts, a municipality handbook and some other information with respect to acquiring audit services and other services as well. In the Florida Auditor General's office, under technical guidance, that's where you'd find a whole bunch of resources that are specific to how financial reporting is done by local governments, as well as for not-for-profits and for-profits that have a reporting responsibility to the state. Some information that's specific to elementary, secondary, and higher education, and these are the places where local governments and other types of governments in Florida, for instance, are going to be looking to find the information they need to be in compliance with the state's laws and rules and policies with respect to accounting and financial reporting. And Florida is a state where they just this year or this past year started a new kind of reporting that is intended to feed into easily manipulable and searchable financial data for all of the governments in the state. It's not quite XBRL, but it's that kind of idea where you can drill down into the information. And so I know that one of the documents that's in that section, is detailed instructions for governments as to how they are supposed to use that new system to submit their information. In the state of New Mexico, one of the things that I found really amazing about their state auditor's office website was they have all these FAQs, and they start from really broad topics like what is an audit, what is an audit opinion, and what do the different types of opinions mean, what are agreed upon procedures, and then even gets into more specific things and covers some of the questions that Gwen was talking about today, like what is the Yellow Book, or what are GAGAS, one of my favorite acronyms to pronounce, and some things that are specific to the rules and requirements of the state of New Mexico. And then if you look over here, on this website under auditing, there's all kinds of really useful information. And actually, just for a second before I talk about that, this is the bottom or close to the bottom of the page of those FAQs. What I showed on the previous page was only one page worth. I think you could scroll down a couple of times and find a ton more. And these are down here toward the bottom. Some of those that are more specific to procedures in the state of New Mexico and less broad or educational or generic. So under these auditing resources, one section is specific to financial audits, and this has information that I think is available both for people in government and for auditors, and helping governments to identify auditors that they can engage to do their financial statement audits or some of the other agreed upon procedures, as well as information that's useful to the audit firms themselves. And then in that same area, there's a bunch of resources specifically for audit firms for helping them to navigate the process of obtaining clients or bidding for engagements to audit local government financial statements and the rules and regulations that surround that process. The second type of state level entity that is likely to have a lot of useful information are state departments of education. They have a significant oversight responsibility for school districts and charter schools and other elementary and secondary education entities in each of the states for the entirety of their operations. But one of the key areas that they provide oversight for and often support and technical assistance is in the area of finance, in budgeting, in accounting, and in financial reporting. All the state departments of education have significant reporting requirements for school districts because the state departments of education in turn are required by the federal Department of Education to report a lot of information, both financial and non-financial, to the DOE, the federal DOE, in its data collection efforts and its reporting efforts on the results of school district operations. And it may be the place where instead of the state auditor's office, where you may find the accounting policies and financial reporting requirements that are specific to public school districts and charter schools. So in this particular Department of Education for the state of Georgia, if you mouse over finance and obligations, you can see there's one section where they have resources that are specific to budget and finance related issues. The Texas Education Agency has a tremendous website. There's a lot of really useful information on there. They are overseeing all of the finance activities of the many school districts in the state of Texas, and that's where you find the accounting and financial reporting requirements. You can actually even find all of the financial statements from the school districts, the audited financial statements on that website. That's something that is in the other states with the audit offices that I was talking about before. If it's a state where the state auditor's office does financial statement audits, you typically will be able to find those financial statement audits on the auditor's website as well. So if you're interested in seeing what other, if you're perhaps new to financial reporting in the government environment, and you want to see what other similar governments have done, that's one place you can go to find a whole bunch of examples of real life audited financial statements that you can compare with. In particular, in TEA, in the Texas Education Agency, under financing grants, there is a tremendous amount of information. Under financial compliance, that's where all their rules and regulations for accounting systems, for producing audited financial statements, that's where they all appear. There's a lot of information there about dealing with grants, which obviously are a vast majority of the funding that a lot of school districts receive will be state level and federal level grant funding, and there's two whole sections on that alone. And then the third type of entity at the state level that you're likely to find a lot of useful information in is state controllers. And for the most part, state controllers are responsible for preparing the state's financial statements, but many of them also have local government oversight responsibilities. This is, for example, the New Mexico Department of Finance and Administration, is where the New Mexico State Controller's Office is located. These controller offices, if you're just trying to find them cold, can be a little harder to find, because they may be located in different places or different agencies with different names. Finance and administration is often the name you find. It may be an entirely freestanding entity called the state controller, like it is in the state of New York. But sometimes you have to search around a little bit. My key to doing that when I'm trying to get to them quickly is I go to NASAC's website, the National Association of State Auditors, Controllers, and Treasurers. So that's NASACT, NASACT.org. And they have a directory of all of the auditors, controllers, and treasurers at the state level in the United States and in its territories and provinces. So in this particular example, the state controller that I thought had some really useful information under local government, there's a budget and finance bureau, and within that, a bunch of resources specifically related to budget and finance issues. And you can see some of them to the left here, as fundamental and as rudimentary as Budgeting 101, but also then getting into more, specific and detailed issues and, some information specific to treasurer functions, both at the state level and for local governments within the state of New Mexico. This is the state of Tennessee's. I happen to pick two examples here that both are called the Department of Finance and Administration, but this is another state controller's website that has a tremendous amount of useful information. Often the case, it'll be often the case that you will clearly see that it'll say local government or local government financial, like it says here. So it'll be easy to find the things that are specific to you as a local government official. But this, sorry, I didn't mean to jump past it yet. But this particular website has a bunch of webinars that are directed toward local government officials, a lot of coronavirus information. So all these websites, you know, pretty much any state government website that you're looking at has a lot of information about, you know, for local governments to help them deal with coronavirus related issues, dealing with the funding. And of course, these are going to be, I would imagine in most cases, consistent with the types of resources Gwen was pointing to at the GAO and at the GAQC, but within the more specific context of your particular state.
Excellent stuff, Dean. Hey, so before I launch this last polling question, we've had some good Q&As coming in, so thank you. This is a great group asking questions, so I'll get to those as well here shortly. But Dean, you mentioned something there that really triggered something in my head. You mentioned example financial statements, because one of the most common things I get asked for is, you know, oh, I've read the GASB, I understand the concept. Can I just see a copy? You know, can I see a completed one? I just want to, you know, I want to see what it looks like in practice from someone else who's kind of blazed the trail. I think you were saying it was specifically on the Texas Education Administration or Authority's website that you found some. So, you know, what I took from that was these websites that you're listing, you don't have to be in Texas in a school to get value from it. You could go on there and just use it as an example for a GASB implementation. Was it that website that you were referring to as a good one?
Yeah, I believe that all of the Texas school district audits are on TEA's website, and you're right, they're following GAAP like any other government is, and there may be some peculiarities for Texas versus other states, not because it's Texas, but because there are some, you know, each state has some of its own unique features and interests, but all of them still have to be consistent with GAAP. And so you could be from another state and look at a Texas school district's financial statements, you know, and know that it's following the same standards, and it would be something that you could feel safe in using as a model for your own reporting. The GFOA website too is another place. You know, if you want to feel like, you know, I'm not just randomly picking a government and looking at its financial statements, but some feeling that these are, you know, skilled, those skis that Gwen was talking about, the skills and knowledge and experience. GFOA, as many of you know, has a certificate program, and governments have to prepare a full ACFR, an annual comprehensive financial report, in order to receive that certificate of achievement in financial reporting, and has to, you know, meet a whole long checklist that has gone over by independent reviewers in order to get that reward. All of those reports that have received the reward are available on GFOA's website. You can search for them. You can sort by type of government. You can sort by name, by state that they're located in, and you know, they usually have several years worth of them. So if you want to find other governments in your state, and you know that these are, you know, par excellence type financial reports because they've received this certificate of achievement, you know, that's a good place to go looking for, you know, good examples of how financial reports ought to be done.
Excellent. Dean, before I get to this poll, you talked about that, the GFOA award, and if you prepare an ACFR and go through, you know, meet all the requirements in the checklist, then you can get the certificate. For anyone who's not currently getting the certificate, is interested in it, but is curious, what does it take? What's on the checklist? Is there somewhere they can go to find that checklist and see what hoops they'll have to jump through to get the certificate?
Yeah, so if you go back and you look at that slide that from the GFOA, we're looking at their main web, their homepage, and I had highlighted where the best practices and the resources were. Another one of those main menu items up there is related to their certificate programs. They have them for awards for more than just the ACFR. They also have budget presentation awards and popular reporting awards. And so that's the place you'd go to find the reports. And that's where you're also going to find information about the certificate programs, what the requirements are. I think you can actually download you may be able to download the checklist there, and you can see it's quite long and has a lot of items that the reviewers meticulously go through to make sure that those are there. And so if someone were interested in moving from basic financial statements and supporting information to producing a full ACFR, pretty much everything you need is there. And of course, the folks here at CRI, have a lot of experience working with governments that produce ACFRs, and I'm sure would be able to help any government that was interested in talking about what they would need to do to take that next step.
That's excellent. Thank you. And I know you may be one of those people. If someone calls CRI and needs a hand, you may be one of the people
Anytime.
helping them.
My contact information is at the end of the slides.
Excellent, because you are one of the GFOA's expert ACFR reviewers, so you do that for the GFOA, I believe, already.
I do.
So, awesome, excellent. And in there, you mentioned the slides. Just for all the participants, slides will be emailed out to each of you, as well as actually the recording for this session within the next couple of days. So, and if you want the recording, if you lose the email and you still want the recording, it's always available on the website. So. Anyway, I've taken another little intermission there. We're going to do the last polling question here. Like I was saying, I'm launching it now. Like I was saying, we have got some questions in, so I'm going to read this, give everyone a moment to get their answers in, and then Gwen, I'm going to pick on you with a couple of these questions if I may. So be prepared. So, question 8, the last polling question of the day, asks, what services does CRI provide to government and public sector clients? Is it audit and single audits, consulting on implementation of specific standards, financial statement preparation, internal audit and performance audits, or all of the above and a lot more? I can see all the answers coming in pretty quickly. A lot of people doing very well getting this one right. So whilst the last few answers are coming in, Gwen, let me put you on the spot. You talked about FraudNet, so I'm picking on you for this one. It's a question about FraudNet, and it just asks, what should be reported to GAO through FraudNet?
Typically fraud, if you have concerns about fraud, waste, or abuse involving federal funds, as well as any mismanagement of federal funding, that would be the place to report it. And then experts and investigators will investigate. I am very familiar with the state of New Mexico has a similar option through the New Mexico State Auditor's Office. And I'm sure that other state auditors do also have a similar whistleblowing and reporting service. So FraudNet would be if you have concerns about federal funding, fraud, waste, abuse, or mismanagement related to those funds. If you would be more focused on either state funding or perhaps violations of state laws related to finance, I would look at your state auditor's website for guidance.
Terrific, thank you, Gwen. And I know that in the auditor rules for governments, fraud, waste, and abuse, there's been extra emphasis added in the last couple of years on what we look for as auditors in that regard.
Yes.
So certainly, I think it's waste and abuse was added. You're gonna have to help me out on the year of the Yellow Book guidance.
2018 is the new Yellow Book.
Okay, and that's where it placed extra emphasis. So auditors will be should be looking for more in that regard. So second question, Gwen, stay with me. I've got one more here, and it's a Yellow Book one, so it's a good segue. How do I know if my audit will be under the Yellow Book? I think you maybe addressed this, but if you can just hit that one more time.
Yes, it's definitely a good reminder. Any single audit will be under the Yellow Book. As a reminder, the current rules there are federal expenditures of $750,000 or more during a fiscal year, makes you subject to the single audit. It is very possible for other grant agreements, whether they are federal or not, they may be state, they may even be from a nonprofit or other entity, to require an audit under government auditing standards or the Yellow Book. And in addition, state laws may also require that. And of course, that's going to vary place by place and entity by entity. It is also possible for the entity that is contracting for the audit, that could be management, that could be those charged with governance when that's a different group, such as a board of county commissioners, board of education, city council, etc. It is also possible for them to request an audit under government auditing standards if one is not required to be given.
Terrific. Thank you, Gwen. Couple of final questions. So I want to thank everyone again for submitting the questions. This has been a great group today. I love guessing questions, showing some good engagement and participation. So last couple, Dean, I think you may have touched on this first one. I'm going to switch to you, put you on the spot. And this one asks, what types of archived webinars are available from the Government Audit Quality Centre? I think you touched on this earlier. So if not, if you can address that or just remind us. Oh, and I think you're muted.
Well, that was bound to happen. Luckily, we got to almost the very end of the webinar. I said something, I was talking about GASB. So on GASB's website, when they do a couple of webinars of their own, typically during the course of the year, and they had one in the fall that was kind of aimed at people who teach or conduct research in governmental and not-for-profit accounting, a joint webinar of the GASB and the FASB. And they usually, once they do those webinars, keep them available, the recording in the archives, for about 6 months. So that's probably still up there. But the GAQC webinars were something that Gwen was talking about.
I apologize. So do you know offhand what sort of webinars, that's the question here, what types of archived webinars do they typically have on the GAQC? Anyone?
There's typically some that relate to the single audit.
Okay.
In recent years, you may be able to find ones about the Provider Relief Fund and other specific programs, such as the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. And I think I mentioned earlier, in the next couple of months, there's going to be one on the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. Now, when you are attending those live for CPE, there is a charge, to get your CPE for those, but typically archived ones will be available for free, but you will not get CPE.
So not everyone does free CPE like CRI. So I guess that's just, I guess we're special. But I did have one last question, Gwen. I've been peppering you. So I don't know who wants to take this last one. This last one asks, where can I find federal regulations that apply to my organization? Specifically looking for online resources for federal regulations. Anyone want to take that one?
Sure. So the most up-to-date and most reliable source of federal regulations in general is the ECFR. That stands for the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations. And this is updated to the exact current federal regulations when they are released. This is, when I'm starting to research something, whether it's within the uniform guidance at 2 CFR 200, or whether it might be a regulation that's referenced in a grant agreement, or say in a policy of an organization. Into my search bar, I will search the reference there and add ECFR, so I can make sure that I get to the real current CFRs that are out there. If it's something more related to OMB, that is the Office of Management and Budget. They are under the White House. So you can be assured that you will be finding the most up-to-date, current, and correct OMB information if you do get there through the whitehouse.gov website. And then the GAO, of course, that will be the Government Accountability Office, and that will be just search for that, and that's the landing page for the Yellow Book and all of the rest of the audit rules there.
Terrific. Thank you, Gwen. Now I will wrap us up here. We're going to share the results for this polling question just because everyone did so well. We got 94% got the answer right. Obviously, CRI does provide all of those services and a lot more to our governmental clients. I'm going to just, like I say, wrap us up, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say that we've talked about resources. There's great resources out there, lots of free resources, and there is going to be that one-page kind of cheat sheet, as I'll call it, that's going to be sent out to all participants in the next couple of weeks. But of course, there's the CRI website as well, cricpa.com. Dean and Gwen both produce a lot of content, as well as our other governmental experts and just experts from across the firm, all industries. At the CRI website, you can find a lot of good content information. Typically on the Insights tab or the Insights page is a good place to go. So that's what I would recommend for people if they're looking for the latest from CRI. Or you can contact your local CRI professionals and ask questions directly to them if you want to do that. But please do check us out. Please stay tuned to what we're going to be doing later in the year. Specific to governments, we will be doing a couple more CPE sessions like this one. Typically, we do them about every 3 to 4 months, so they come fairly quickly. We'll make sure that the contents and the invites are all sent out, but stay tuned and take a look if you're looking for what's coming up. It'll all be listed on the website as well. So I'm going to stop sharing that polling question results. And I just want to thank everyone for the time. Thank our terrific presenters. I know it's been a love fest, me thanking and saying how great everyone is, but it really has been a great session. Lots of useful information. As I said earlier, the recording and the slides should be emailed to everyone if you need them, as well as the recording being listed on the website and that follow-up resource in a couple of weeks. So thank you all for your time. It's been a great session, and have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.